In a dusty town on the edge of a distant galaxy, a mother named Lyra stood before a group of cold, unfeeling judges. Her heart raced, and her knees shook as she made the most difficult decision of her life. Her son, Kian, had broken the law, an unforgivable crime in their society, and the punishment for his actions was severe. The penalty would have been death or worse, but Lyra was determined to save him, even if it meant giving up her own life. Her voice trembled as she spoke, the words heavy with desperation. "Please, take me instead," she begged, her eyes full of sorrow. "I will accept any punishment in his place. He is just a boy. He does not deserve to die." The judges, beings from distant planets, sat in silence, their faces expressionless. They had seen thousands of cases like this before. The law was clear, no exceptions. But Lyra didn't care about their cold rules. Her love for Kian had driven her to this moment of pleading, and she would do anything to protect him. The crowd that gathered to watch the trial whispered among themselves. Some felt pity for the mother, while others were indifferent. It was a familiar story, one that repeated itself time and time again in their world. Lyra's eyes locked with the chief judge, a tall, gray-skinned alien who had seen too many parents beg for their children's lives. He had no interest in mercy, only in enforcing the law. Yet, something about Lyra's plea made him pause. Her voice was full of raw emotion, something rare in a world that valued strength and logic over feeling. The silence in the room was thick, like a heavy fog. The crowd waited, unsure of what would happen next. Would the judges show mercy, or would they enforce the law, no matter the cost? Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as the minutes passed. She didn't know if she could keep going. Her words were all she had left. She took a deep breath and spoke again, this time more softly. "I am his mother. If you have to punish someone, let it be me. He is innocent." The judges exchanged glances, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something in their eyes, something Lyra couldn't quite understand. Was it pity? Was it doubt? She couldn't tell, but it gave her a glimmer of hope. But just as she thought the room would fall silent again, a voice from the back broke the stillness. "She is right," the voice said, calm but firm. All eyes turned to the source of the voice, an earthling, a human, standing in the shadows at the edge of the room. His name was Eric, and he had been watching the entire trial in silence. He stepped forward, his gaze steady as he looked at Lyra, then at the judges. The room went still. No one had expected a human to speak up, let alone intervene in such a serious matter. Lyra's eyes widened, unsure of what this strange being might do. Would he speak for her? Would he help her save her son? Eric's voice rang out once more, this time directed at the judges. "I offer myself in her place," he said. "Punish me instead. Let her son live." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. A human offering himself for her son? Was it possible that mercy would truly prevail? The judges looked at each other, their expressionless faces unreadable. Lyra could only stand there, her heart racing, waiting for their decision. Would they accept Eric's offer, or would the law win out in the end? The tension in the room thickened as Eric's words hung in the air, challenging the very foundation of their society. The crowd shifted uneasily, unsure of how to react. A human, someone from another world entirely, had just offered to take the punishment for a crime he had no part in. The judges, who had never before wavered in their duties, exchanged cautious glances. Lyra stood frozen, her mind racing. She had asked for mercy, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined someone, let alone a human, would stand up and offer himself in her place. Eric's calm demeanor stood in sharp contrast to the anxiety swirling in the room. His eyes, filled with determination, never left the judges as he spoke again. "I don't believe in laws that demand such cruelty," he said, his voice unwavering. "I've seen enough suffering to know that no one should have to die for a mistake." Lyra's chest tightened. She had heard stories of humans, their strange ways, their compassion, but she had never seen it in action. There was no reason for him to help her. They were strangers, yet he was willing to put himself in harm's way to protect her son. The enormity of his offer sank in, and she felt a wave of gratitude and confusion flood her. The chief judge, an imposing figure who had seen the best and worst of the galaxy, took a step forward, his eyes narrowing as he appraised Eric, You understand the weight of your words, human?" he asked, his voice cold and steady. "The law here is absolute. You will face the same consequences as the one you seek to protect." Eric nodded without hesitation, his expression resolute. "I do, and I accept that. The law might be absolute in your world, but in mine, there's something stronger than law: compassion." Lyra could hardly breathe. She had always believed that the universe was a cold and unforgiving place. Laws were unyielding, and justice was something handed down from above, never questioned. But now, standing before her, was a human who defied everything she had known. Was this the mercy she had begged for? Was this the answer she had longed for, yet never dared to believe in? The judges deliberated silently, the weight of the decision heavy on their minds. It was a rare thing for them to be challenged so directly, especially by someone from another world. After what felt like an eternity, the chief judge finally spoke. "Very well," he said, his voice cutting through the thick silence. "We will allow this trial to proceed, but on one condition: you will face the punishment intended for the boy. If you survive, your mercy will be granted. If not, the law will be upheld." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The stakes had just been raised higher than she could have ever imagined. Eric was not just offering his life for her son, he was risking his life, everything he had, for a stranger. The enormity of the situation hit her like a wave, and she realized that she had just witnessed something extraordinary. But could Eric truly survive the trial? And even if he did, what would that mean for her son? The room fell silent once more. Every eye focused on the human who had dared to challenge the unyielding law. And in that silence, Lyra's heart filled with hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, mercy could triumph over punishment. The trial chamber was unlike anything Eric had ever seen. The air felt thick, charged with an energy that pulsed in the walls, as if the very space itself was alive with anticipation. The floor beneath his feet was cold, smooth like glass, and the bright overhead lights flickered as though they, too, were uncertain about what was about to unfold. Lyra stood by his side, her face a mix of hope and fear, watching him as though he were her last tether to a world she could no longer trust. Eric took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had faced danger before, but never like this. He wasn't fighting for his own life, but for the life of someone he had just met, a woman whose pain he could feel like it was his own. And now, he was going to face a punishment designed for someone else, a punishment that could destroy him. But he was committed. This was his choice, his offer, and he wasn't going to back down now. The stakes were too high, not just for him, but for the future of this world, for Lyra, and for her son, Kian. The judges, seated high above on their stone thrones, regarded him with detached curiosity. They had heard stories of humans before, but they had never met one like Eric. He was different. There was a fire in his eyes, a determination that burned brighter than the harsh light above. As they activated the trial's first test, a low hum filled the chamber, and the floor beneath Eric shifted, revealing a labyrinth of deadly traps. Lyra gasped as she saw the maze unfold before them. It was a cruel design meant to test a being's physical and mental endurance, an obstacle course that could break the spirit of anyone who dared to enter. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about conquering fear, pain, and the overwhelming urge to give up. The trial had broken many before him, and there was little chance anyone had ever survived it. Yet Eric, standing tall and unwavering, didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on the path ahead. The first obstacle was a pit of jagged rocks, a deadly fall awaiting anyone who misstepped. But Eric didn't hesitate. With a surge of agility, he leapt across the gap, his body twisting midair to land with precision on the other side. His breath came in sharp gasps, but his resolve was unshaken. He had made it past the first test, but the real challenge was still to come. As he continued deeper into the labyrinth, the tests grew more severe. Walls of fire, shifting platforms that threatened to drop him into oblivion, and strange creatures that lurked in the shadows, all were designed to break his spirit. But Eric pressed on. Every time he stumbled, he pushed himself back up. Every time he was burned, he ignored the pain. His mind was focused on one thing: Lyra, her son, her plea, and the promise he had made. But in the midst of the trial, something unexpected began to happen. As he fought through the obstacles, He began to understand the alien world around him, to feel the pulse of its culture, its history. These tests weren't just about surviving, they were about proving something deeper, something that had eluded even the coldest of beings in this society. Eric was proving that compassion, not strength, was the true power in the universe. And with each step, he realized that he wasn't just fighting for Lyra's son. He was fighting for something much greater, the chance to show that humanity's heart was stronger than any law. As he approached the final obstacle, a wave of relief washed over him. He had made it. But then, as if to remind him of the stakes, the ground beneath him began to shake violently. The final test was upon him, and it was going to be the hardest one yet. Would Eric be able to withstand it? Would he survive, or would the law claim its due? Lyra watched from the side, her heart in her throat. She had witnessed his strength, but she wondered, would it be enough? Could mercy truly prevail over punishment? The final obstacle loomed ahead, a wall of searing heat rising from the ground like a living beast, crackling with energy. Eric's legs were shaking from exhaustion, his body bruised and battered from the trial's relentless tests. Sweat dripped down his forehead, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The firewall seemed to stretch endlessly upward, its flames licking the air with a hunger that promised no mercy to those who dared to cross it. Lyra stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear. She had watched every step of Eric's struggle, unable to intervene, unable to do anything but hope. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked at the raging flames in front of him. He had made it this far, but could he truly survive the final test? The weight of her emotions threatened to overwhelm her, yet she refused to look away. She had placed her trust in Eric, and now she could only watch as he faced the most dangerous challenge of all. The firewall roared louder, its heat becoming unbearable. Eric could feel the scorching air as it pressed against his skin, threatening to burn him alive. He clenched his fists, determination flashing in his eyes. He couldn't fail now. He had promised Lyra that he would save her son, that he would stand in her place and face whatever came. As the flames surged higher, a strange calmness washed over him. He had survived everything the trial had thrown at him: treacherous paths, dangerous creatures, impossible obstacles. But this wall of fire felt different. It wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a test of his very soul. Could he endure? Could he hold on to the promise he had made, even if it meant facing a fiery death? With a sudden burst of strength, Eric lunged forward, running toward the wall of fire. His feet barely touched the ground as he surged forward, the heat intensifying with every step. His eyes never left the flames, his mind focused solely on the goal ahead. Just as the fire seemed to close in on him, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling the searing burn of the flames, a strange coolness surrounded him, as if the fire itself had parted. For a moment, Eric thought he had imagined it, but the sensation was real. He pushed forward, his legs moving faster now, the fire parting in front of him like water parting for a ship's hull. Lyra gasped in shock as she saw what was happening. She couldn't believe her eyes. The fire wasn't consuming him. It was moving aside, almost as if it were guiding him. Was this the power of mercy, of compassion? She didn't know, but what she saw in that moment filled her with awe and wonder. Eric wasn't just surviving the trial, he was transcending it. With one final push, Eric broke through the last of the flames, landing on the other side with a roll, his body collapsing onto the cool ground. He gasped for air, his heart racing, but he was alive. He had made it. He had survived the trial. The room was silent. The judges, the crowd, and even the flames themselves seemed to pause in disbelief. Eric, the human, had done what no one else had ever done before. He had overcome the trial, not with brute strength or violence, but with something far more powerful: his unwavering belief in mercy. In compassion, Lyra rushed to his side, her heart swelling with gratitude and disbelief. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." Eric smiled weakly, his exhaustion evident in the way his body sagged. "It wasn't just me," he said, his voice hoarse. "It was you too, Lyra. We're in this together." As they both looked up at the judges, the silence was broken by the chief judge's voice, low and contemplative. "You have passed the trial, human," he said. His tone changed, no longer cold or distant. You have proven that mercy is a power stronger than any law. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The impossible had happened. Mercy had triumphed over punishment. And in that moment, she realized that the world, for once, had changed. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Eric lay on the ground, his body bruised and battered, but alive. The flames had parted for him, the final trial overcome in a way no one had expected. Lyra couldn't help but stare at him, disbelief still coursing through her veins. He had defied the odds, fought through every obstacle with nothing but his will to protect her son, and now the impossible had become a reality. As the last flickers of the fire dissipated, Lyra stepped forward, her hands shaking, unsure whether to reach out for him or just watch in awe. The world around her seemed to fall away. The cold, impersonal judges, the harsh rules of this world. The pain of watching her son's fate hang in the balance, all of it felt distant now, as if it belonged to another life. Eric stirred, his chest rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. His eyes fluttered open, the exhaustion evident on his face. But there was something else there too, a quiet strength, a resolve that hadn't faltered even when death had been so close. Lyra knelt beside him, her voice a soft whisper in the heavy silence. "Eric, you did it. You saved him." He gave her a tired smile, his eyes meeting hers. "We did it, Lyra. You're not alone anymore." Just then, the chief judge stepped forward, his figure towering over them. The crowd, which had watched in stunned silence, now shifted restlessly. They were waiting for the final word, the judgment that would decide everything. Lyra could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it. Eric had proven his worth, but would mercy truly win out? Would the law bend in the face of compassion? The chief judge's voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. "Human," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You have passed the trial. Your strength is undeniable, but it is your heart that has truly proven your worth. You have shown mercy when none was asked for, compassion where there was none. And for that, we will grant the life of the boy." Lyra's heart leapt in her chest, the words filling her with a joy so overwhelming she almost couldn't process them. Her son would live. Her son was going to be spared. The trial was over. But as the weight of the words settled in, Lyra turned to Eric, her eyes filled with gratitude and wonder. She hadn't just been saved from the law, from the punishment she feared for her son. She had witnessed something far greater. Eric's courage had changed everything, not just for her, but for everyone in this world. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just save my son. You saved all of us." Eric, his strength fading as exhaustion took over, nodded slowly. "Sometimes all it takes is one person to make a difference, one act of kindness to change everything." And in that moment, as the echoes of the trial faded into silence, the world seemed to shift, as if the walls of cruelty and rigid law had cracked ever so slightly, letting in a light that had never before touched this place. The impossible had become possible, and mercy, not punishment, had triumphed. The room was still, the echoes of the final judgment hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Lyra could hardly believe it. Her son, Kian, was safe. The law, the punishment that had seemed so unyielding, had been overcome, not by force, but by mercy, by the unexpected kindness of a human. It was more than she had ever hoped for, more than she had believed was possible. But even as she embraced the reality of her son's salvation, a new question lingered in her mind. What would come next? The chief judge turned his gaze toward the crowd, and a ripple of murmurs spread through the room. The alien spectators, once eager to see the punishment meted out with strict adherence to the law, were now filled with confusion and awe. They had witnessed something they had never imagined: a human standing up for what was right, defying their rigid system of justice and winning. Eric had not only survived the trial, he had shattered their understanding of what justice truly meant. Lyra's heart swelled with gratitude as she looked at Eric, who was still kneeling on the floor, struggling to sit up. He had fought not for himself, but for her son, and now, as she looked at him, she saw something that made her heart ache. He was exhausted, wounded, his body pushed beyond its limits, but there was something else in his eyes, something unspoken, a quiet relief. He had done what he came here to do. The judges remained silent, and the weight of their judgment seemed to shift. After a long pause, the chief judge stepped forward again, his voice no longer cold, but contemplative. "You have proven that mercy is not weakness," he said, his tone almost reverential. "You have shown us that compassion is a force stronger than law. You, human, have changed our understanding of justice." Eric looked up, his gaze steady despite the pain. "Mercy isn't about being weak. It's about understanding that there's more to a life than punishment. There's room for redemption, for change." Lyra could hardly contain the emotions that surged within her. She reached out, her hands trembling, and helped Eric to his feet. As she did, she realized that this moment was not just about her son's freedom, it was about the world itself, about everything they had known being upended in the most unexpected way. Eric smiled at her, his words soft but filled with truth. "The law doesn't always have to be followed blindly. Sometimes, the right thing is the hardest thing." As they stood together, with Kian now running to his mother's side, Lyra felt a new sense of hope blossoming within her. The impossible had been made real. The law had been bent, not through rebellion, but through the power of understanding, compassion, and one human's unwavering belief that mercy was worth fighting for. The world around them had shifted, and though the future was still uncertain, for the first time, Lyra felt that anything was possible. The trial was over, but the world around them seemed to be just beginning. Lyra stood in the midst of it all, her son Kian clinging to her side, his eyes wide with disbelief. It had happened. Against all odds, against all the cruelty of the system, they had found a way through. But as the weight of the moment began to sink in, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only the beginning of something much larger. The mercy that had triumphed over law could not go unnoticed. It would change everything, not just for her and Kian, but for the world they lived in. Eric, though exhausted, stood beside her, a quiet strength emanating from him. He had done more than save Kian's life. He had reshaped their understanding of what it meant to fight for justice. She had seen mercy in his eyes, a human warmth that was foreign to this cold, unfeeling society. She had never believed something like this was possible, but here he was, standing beside her, and her world felt like it was shifting beneath her feet. The crowd, still in stunned silence, began to murmur. They had witnessed something extraordinary, but what would they do with this new understanding? The judges had granted mercy, but they had done so reluctantly. They had been forced to confront a truth they had long denied, that sometimes compassion could be more powerful than the law. Would they change their ways, or would they return to their old ways, hardened by centuries of tradition? Lyra didn't know, but she could feel the tide turning. Eric's voice broke through her thoughts. "This isn't just about us," he said quietly, his gaze meeting hers. "It's about showing them, all of them, that there's another way. That kindness can change the world, one person at a time." Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "But what happens now? What does this mean for us?" she asked, unsure of the future. Eric looked at her, his smile faint but genuine. "It means we've started something. It means that mercy has a place in this world, and maybe, just maybe, the rest of the galaxy will see it too, for the first time in years." Lyra felt a flicker of hope. The future had always seemed like a distant, unreachable thing, full of pain and fear. But now, she could see the possibility of change. Maybe it wasn't going to be easy, and maybe the journey ahead would be filled with struggle. But for the first time, the world didn't seem quite so cold. As they walked away from the trial chamber, side by side, Lyra felt her son's small hand slip into hers. Kian's face was filled with wonder, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she wasn't afraid. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she had witnessed something extraordinary. The law had been bent, but it hadn't broken, and that, more than anything, was a victory that no one could take away. The crowd began to disperse, but the echo of what had happened would linger in the air, filling the space with the promise of something new. The judges, once so unyielding, had been forced to reckon with the power of human compassion. And while they may have returned to their cold, distant roles, the world had changed. Eric had shown them that there was always room for mercy, no matter how dark the world seemed. As they disappeared into the horizon, the future stretched out before them, uncertain, but full of possibility. And for the first time, Lyra allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, The world could be a place where mercy, not punishment, was the greatest power of all.